So yeah, as Dajoti said, yeah, my name's Alex. I've lived and worked at the EcoDharma Centre for about 10 years, and a large part of that work was sort of working in the kind of arena of bringing Buddhism and social change together, and lots of different ways, sort of different strands in the vision to try and address that. It's quite broad, obviously, but one of the kind of areas in that has been looking at sort of the sort of end of kind of engaged Buddhism and trying to kind of support Buddhists or kind of engage with the Buddhist world or whatever in a way that tries to kind of explore how to support more sort of active engagement in the world, whatever that means. And that's kind of the sort of arena that I'm going to be talking in today, kind of drawing on some experience, on some of that experience. So, the title is Cultivating Agency. A lot of people have asked me what my talk was about, and I would say that title, and then probably 80% of people go, all right. It seems like, I don't know how, that the word agency seems to be like not so, such a common word, not so familiar to some people. I've tried to think of other words, but there isn't another word that really says that. So anyway, there's a subtitle, so it's okay, which is what qualities and perspectives do we need in order to meet the existential threats we're facing, and how do we develop them? So this talk, in a way, is much more what I'm going to talk about. What I want to explore is more talking about the experience, having an experience of agency, rather than talking about what should we all go and do, sort of thing. I want to look at, when we have an experience of feeling like, it's too much, I don't know what to do, it's confusing, I'm overwhelmed, I can't engage, I don't have any power, I just can't do it, sort of thing. That experience, which is really like a disempowered experience, what can we do? What conditions can we put in place in our lives that will mean that we don't have that experience so much, that we have more of an experience of like, I can do something. I'm not going to talk about what you might do. So what I thought I'd do is begin by just saying a few things about, sort of setting the scene a little bit, like talking a little bit about what we are meeting or facing at the moment. Not because I think people in here don't know that, because I expect you do, but more just to sort of connect myself and us in with that a little bit, so that we know what we're talking about or why we're talking about what we're talking about. So I'll just say a few things. I mentioned existential threats in the title. The main one that I guess most at the forefront of most of our minds here will be the climate crisis. And we, towards the end of last year, we had kind of the reports coming out around, statistics around extinction, stuff that kind of preceded the emergence of Extinction Rebellion. Statistics like 60% of mammals, birds, fish and reptiles have been wiped out, are extinct since 1970. So really small period of time, a huge amount of loss, and beings, miracles that will never come back. You'll never see them again, and we're not slowing down. That process is still going on. So just like taking that in a bit. There are sort of implications to that. We don't, Frank Egler, who's a systems theorist, quite a famous, people might have heard the quote, but he says it's not that natural systems are more complex than we think, it's that they're more complex than we can think. So we're 60%, we've got 60% extinction of all these species as part of like a biodiverse kind of landscape that is then getting affected in ways that actually we just don't know. We don't know how long, we don't know what the effects of that are going to be, basically. We just don't know how long life can sustain itself when we've got huge chunks of what makes things kind of work in balance getting pulled out, kind of thing. You know, bees are a good example, aren't they? Everyone's talking about bees. If we don't have bees, we can't pollinate the food, sort of thing. It's like, yeah, at what point? It's very hard to predict kind of where we might find ourselves as we kind of continue to kind of mess about with the kind of balance of things or whatever. And then you've also got the kind of the effects on the atmosphere of the sort of excessive carbon consumption, which means I mean, we know, don't we? Everything's warming up, natural disasters, oceans, calcification of coral reefs which don't recover, oceans rising. That also, the implications of some of the predictions around the rising of sea levels is just like incredible, really. We're looking at hundreds of thousands of people in coastal cities being displaced. So like cities like Miami or New York or Osaka or Rio de Janeiro, or like huge, important, parts of the kind of infrastructure of the globe, but also just like places where people live are just going to be, potentially, from what a lot of predictions are suggesting, underwater. Where are all those people going to go? We've already seen what a relatively small migrant crisis compared to that around the kind of Syria conflict. We've already seen what the consequences of that have been in some ways, pretty horrific, and it's going to be, it's hard to sort of engage with, really. Food security, water security, resource security, conflicts that come out of that, and just what we kind of know about humans, and what we've also seen from sort of history, I guess, is that as people begin to feel more threatened and afraid, and they don't have water and food and resource security, and they've got, refugees are coming to do this or that, whatever, the experience of fear that can come up for people around that generally gives rise to, or can easily give rise to, fascism, the rise of sort of tyrannical leaders, and the kind of further sort of global sort of destabilization that comes about through that.
Alex, I'm really sorry to interrupt you. Can you use your voice a little bit?
So, in a way, like, none of us really know what's going to happen, and I definitely don't know. And I guess, like, it doesn't take that much kind of coming into relationship with some of the information and a little bit of sort of interest and imagination to find, well, it's not hard for me to find myself in a place of like, some sort of slightly dystopic scenario, basically. Like, it's kind of hard to imagine that within the next 50 to 100 years we're not going to be engaging with some quite intense changes and challenges to the kind of world that we're used to. It's hard to imagine that that's not going to be the case. And I guess the more we come into relationship with this stuff, the more that we kind of try to educate ourselves about it, the more that we try and do things about it and are kind of in contact with that content, it just gets like bigger and bigger in a way. The experience of like how can we possibly engage with this? I suppose I kind of don't really believe anyone who doesn't have that experience if they're actually genuinely trying to meet what's going on. It's just like it's so hard to comprehend and understand. It's more complex than we can think. Like all the different elements and dimensions that are going on across the globe in different ways. It's really just hard to understand. It's emotionally like not only. Well, there's the potential for a lot of negative and difficult emotions to come up: overwhelm, anger, fear, grief. And the more we engage with it, the more that's kind of around, and most of us just don't have the ability to stay open to that level of intensity, emotional intensity. So we either kind of block it out, or find other kind of ways to manage that that don't enable us to stay in relationship with it. And I think we also, feel feel disempowered. We feel like there aren't good avenues for like making a difference, basically. Even if we feel like, I kind of know what I could do, and I kind of feel like I can handle my emotional response to it, like, where are the avenues to achieve anything? Where is agency for us in that way? Like, yeah, there's a handful of people with loads of money and power, and they don't really care. They don't really give a shit about what we want. It's easy to feel like that as well, isn't it? So yeah, I want to talk about what we might do, how we might engage. Oh no, not how we might engage. What we might do, what we might consider putting in place for ourselves to try and address some of that experience of like overwhelm, confusion, and sort of disempowerment or impotence. And I'm going to do it in quite a sort of like a clear and strategic way. So let's talk about clarity and uncertainty. So if we're going to overcome the experience of, we're not going to overcome it. If we're going to kind of address and work with the experience of confusion and uncertainty, we're going to need to develop. Well, first I think we're going to have to like accept that we don't know. Like it is more complex than we can think. It's like we can't expect ourselves to become geniuses who know exactly what's going on in the world and we know what to do and we're going to do it, sort of thing. It's like, in a way, we can do what we can, but the experience of feeling like I'm not intelligent enough. That I've heard that a lot from people. Like, I just feel like I'm not intelligent enough to engage with this. Like, I just don't really understand enough to be able to have any sort of, to feel any kind of like, also just sort of personal legitimacy in sort of engaging with this stuff. It's like, I just feel confused, basically. And that's really understandable. It's very hard to kind of engage with in a way. It's very complicated. But I think we can do quite a lot to sort of work with our minds in ways that mean that we can have much more experience of things like clarity, focus, sort of brightness of mind. And in a way, my sort of response to this big problem is like, it could sound a bit twee in a way. It's like, oh yeah, so basically I'm really confused about this really complex, overwhelming thing, and someone says to me, just like follow your breath, it'll really help. But actually, practices that can help us gather the kind of dispersed, fragmented, sort of superficial, dull experience of our minds can have like such a huge impact on our experience of everything. I mean, in a way, it's like there isn't anything else for us in our lives except our minds. Like you know, our lives are our minds. Everything that's happening, everything we're coming into relationship with is filtered through and is kind of made of the quality of mind. And we have in terms of agency, we have a huge amount of agency to work with that, to cultivate and develop qualities of mind that are not confused, that are not fragmented, that are not in this kind of state of like being spread so thin because the mind is like, when we're in it, the kind of natural state of a human mind is like that, isn't it? It's like until we've done any work on it, that is what it does. It just kind of skims around on the surface, jumping on things here and there, and it's like, there's all this potential in our mental energy, and it's just like and as we start to like do practices that try to kind of go, okay, well, I'm going to gather the mind in a little bit to kind of be present with something, we get all this mental energy all in one place, which is like, that's like a huge thing. And none of us really experience that very much, I think. If we're not, I don't know how much meditation and stuff or other kinds of things people in this room have done. Probably some people have done quite a bit of it, but I think it's like kind of taking seriously how transformative and life-changing practices like that can be for us. and yeah, being able to, as we gather the mental energy into the present, so that we both like gain the ability to have sort of continuity with an object, so we stay with something rather than see it for a minute and then see it for another minute. It's like, how can we possibly be clear and not confused if we can't even stay with something long enough to kind of understand it? So we can stay with something, but because we then all have all our attention here, we also get all this depth, which we otherwise don't get because we're kind of skimming around on the surface with our minds like that. We've got continuity, we've got depth, and as a result of that presence, as a result of that gathering, we also then get brightness, rather than the kind of experience of like, oh, I can't, it's a bit dull and I can't quite see what I need to see. It's like the mind gets really sharp and bright in that kind of way. And that just puts us in such a better position to be able to try and engage with something as complex as what the hell's going on in the world. It's like, it's huge, it's really huge. And I think we can kind of engage with, you know, whatever mindfulness practices in very sort of like superficial ways, or in ways that like, oh, it's good to kind of try and be mindful, and it is, and it's great to do that rather than not do it. But I think there's a lot of depth and potential that we can gain from really committing to try and working with our minds. And I just want to really like encourage people to do that, I suppose. Like, I've done it, it's definitely transformed my life. I definitely feel more clear, less confused, and somehow just more intelligent than I used to, because of just learning how to pay attention to something. And I kind of, I really want that for people, I suppose, as well. I often meet people and feel like, gosh, you know, they just haven't had the opportunity to deepen in that way. And they're really missing out on something that would be so wonderful for them. Like kind of, people who've been meditating for years and they haven't had the benefit of like a good teacher or like good conditions, whatever, to really like, plumb the depths of what is available to them. And in a way, I want that for them, and I want it for all of us, because what the hell are we going to do? We don't get ourselves in a position to be able to respond, you know. Another way to say it is like, I just find it so wonderful when I'm around people who have worked on their minds in those ways. It sort of feels like, oh, like we've got some possibility here, kind of thing. And so although in a way, it does sound like a sort of slightly twee response to a huge problem, I do, for me, and what I've seen as well, working with people, working with other people, it's like, I think there is a huge amount of potential that we can kind of harness. We can change our lives by learning to work with our minds, and our ability then to experience ourselves as someone who like has enough clarity, has enough of a sense of like, I can engage with this, like my mind works to engage with this. That has a huge impact on our experience of feeling like we have agency, rather than like, well, I don't know. It's like, how can I feel I have agency when I'm sort of in a space of like that, you know, rather than like, okay, I can, you know, I don't understand the whole thing, but I can engage with this and I can engage with that, and I can sort of see something through, and I know that if that's that, then probably that follows, and you know, the mind just starts to work better in those kinds of ways, and I think that's really, really helpful. So, confusion and uncertainty, tick. Let's talk about overwhelm. So we've done the mind bit, and then you've got the heart bit, haven't you? You've got the sort of like, the emotional challenge of trying to stay open to stuff which is like, just like devastating and frightening, and you know, also, you know, we have grief for what's going on. We have grief for the fact that, like, you know, half of our biodiversity is already gone. That's like, if we open to that, well, maybe not everyone feels grief for that, but probably some people do. But there's also just like personal fear, isn't there? It's like, what's going to happen to me and the people I love? It's like, what world am I going to end up in? Am I going to, that, and in a way it feels like that's the biggest part of the whole thing for me. It's like, how do we get to a place where maybe I don't want to go down that avenue actually. Anyway, we experience fear. I know I'm talking in generalizations, if I say things that are not true for you, it's okay. I'm aware that like things I say aren't true for everyone, but I don't care. I used to say that. Most people experience fear. I experience fear, and other kinds of emotional overwhelm. And what are we going to do to work with that? Because in the same way that we have agency in our minds to kind of gain clarity and brightness and sort of intelligence, we also have emotional agency. And I think we don't always know that. People don't always know that. I think there can really be a thing of like, this is just how I feel, and feelings are just feelings and they just come, kind of thing, and I just have to deal with them somehow. And in a way, building agency in our emotional lives is not about somehow pretending that we feel other than we do feel or something. It's not. It's like we have to. Lost my train. Okay, start again. So, if we're going to address experience of emotional overwhelm and fear, we need to put certain things in place in our emotional lives to enable us to kind of develop the capacities, different sort of dimensions, different kind of emotional capacities or facets that will sort of grow the heart in a way that will enable us to meet what's going on more sustainably and more fully. So the basis of that is that we need a kind of a sort of skillful foundation, a skillful emotional foundation. So skillful in this context means the emotional tendency to fall down in the direction of connection, openness, positivity, rather than an emotional tendency to fall down on the side of closedness, negativity, and aversion. And as a starting point, most of us don't have that, basically. What we have is like, I like the feelings that are nice, I don't like the feelings that aren't nice. We put a lot of energy in our lives into trying to like make things happen that make us feel nice, and try to like avoid things that are going to make us not feel nice. And if that's what we're doing, it's like very like counter sort of, it's like, how on earth are we going to convince ourselves to try and engage with something as enormous as the global suffering we're facing as a result of climate change, if basically what we're doing with our lives is trying to avoid negative experiences or negative feelings or painful feelings? It's like, we're just not going to do it, are we? We don't want to. We want nice feelings, kind of thing. So as a starting point, it's like we need to develop emotional ground that knows how to turn towards experience rather than push it away and close down to it, or grasp after something that stops one being authentically in relationship with what's going on. We then need to sort of build our capacity to honour and meet pain. Because actually just someone saying like, just stay open to pain is like really unhelpful. That's exactly what gives rise to overwhelm in a way, isn't it? It's like we actually don't have the capacity we need to be able to stay open. That's why we end up overwhelmed. So what can we do? How can we work with the heart and the kind of capacity, the holding capacity of the heart to be able to meet more than we feel we can right now? That's also something we have agency in. We need capacities and opportunities to be kind of nourished and open to joy as well. So, if we are someone, we can. All of us have different tendencies, don't we? And we might find that we're someone who has tendencies more in the direction of like just finding things difficult and painful and kind of heading downwards. And we also, we need to be able to do that. We need to be able to head downwards. And that also needs to be held in a context of a heart that knows how to go upwards too, or knows how to connect with. Those are spatial metaphors, right? But yeah, the sort of knows how to open to what is beautiful and joyful and nourishing. We need that as well. If we're gonna have emotional resilience, we need all these dimensions. And with all that, we need the possibility to be able to kind of emotionally live from. And then kind of act from, with the potential to act from a place of depth, emotional depth, rather than like this. oh, I'm really well, oh, I'm really shit, I'm really well, I'm really shit. Those kinds of feelings. Like, it's really hard to feel we have agency if we're being thrown around by our emotions in those kinds of ways. So we also need, through addressing these other things I've mentioned emotionally, we can kind of get to a place where we have a bit more sort of grounding and sort of breadth or something, to be able to be more emotionally, I don't know, balanced or something, or like big or deep or something like that. Whatever word works for you. And luckily there's a really good system of heart practices that address all these things. So people are who's familiar with the Brahma Viharas in here? Okay, not so many. So I mentioned a kind of basic ground of skillfulness. So that within Buddhism, within kind of Buddhist meditation, that would be addressed by a practice called the Metta Bhavana. Are people familiar with metta? More familiar? Yeah. So yeah, metta is usually translated as loving kindness. You can also you can call it what you want: love, openness, intimacy, solidarity. But it's this sort of basic. It's kind of working on the basic ability to turn towards experience, come into relationship, and connect, rather than sort of habitually pushing things away or being in aversion. So it's like the mind practices I was talking about first, called clarity practices. It's like what they do is they counteract our tendency to be distracted, and the metta practice, the heart practices, counteract our tendency to be in aversion, basically. So the way that the Brahma Viharas works is like it's kind of a system of practice, and you have metta in the middle. Metta is like the sort of the ground, and you can't cultivate any of the others without having metta first. So you need this kind of, we can work on a basic ability to just be a bit kinder, basically, in relationship to our own experience, in relationship to other people, in relationship to what's going on in the world. We strengthen the tendency in our emotional lives that kind of wants to kind of turn towards, come into relationship, and be sort of intimate with. What's really helpful about the Brahma Viharas is that they work as a system, so they kind of, each of these practices has kind of dangers. We can kind of end up sort of falling one way or the other into kind of what is often called the near enemies of these practices. So one of the dangers with metta is that it can become a bit sentimental, like, oh, I'm really kind and loving. It's really nice. And that can be, and it can also, there's nothing inherently sort of active about metta. You can end up being quite passive sort of thing, like, I'm really open and I love all beings and I really care about the climate, and then I don't do anything. So within this system we have other elements which can help address some of those dangers. So the way it's usually talked about is you've got metta as a starting point, the capacity to be open, basically, and then we bring that into relationship with suffering. We're sort of looking for the arising of the experience of compassion, and we consciously do that. In a compassion practice, we're consciously trying to turn a kind of quality of skillful heart into relationship with suffering. And what that does is it guards against sentimentality, because it's hard to be all like sweet and sentimental when you're kind of meeting an image of dead children in Syria or something. That's an image that I sometimes use. But it also, inherent in compassion is this active dimension. So if one is having a genuine experience of compassion, there's a desire to do something, and that's also really important that's there for us. If we want to have an experience of agency, there's got to be some feeling in us of like wanting to act, rather than just being happy to sit here feeling nice kind of thing. Some of the dangers of working with compassion is that we kind of end up feeling overwhelmed. We get into sort of what's kind of called horrified anxiety. Then we need more metta, we need more of the skillful kind of kind warmness to kind of balance that, so that we're kind of making sure that we're learning how to be more in relationship with stuff that we could easily find a bit horrifying or overwhelming, but we're not. It's like it's such a this practice is such a wonderful practice. We're sort of like working to like really gently, skillfully like find what's my edge, like how far can I open to this when does it get too much? A bit more metta, pull back a little bit. So we're sort of like subtly, gently working with the heart in ways that gradually over time mean that we have more and more capacity to just be with what is painful to us or frightening or whatever. And again, it's like what a different life to not be afraid of feeling bad, to not be afraid of fear. I mean, can anyone even imagine that? It's huge, I think. Like, we're just so afraid of feeling bad. We're so afraid of coming into a relationship with what is horrible to us. And because it doesn't feel nice, and what this practice does, the best, most beautiful thing about this practice is that it transforms the experience of suffering in us. So we're still coming into a relationship with something that is challenging, but we're not having an experience of like, oh, I'm just going to get strong enough to be able to stay in relationship. It's not like that. It's like something transforms. And yeah, Mark, in your talk yesterday, you talked about sweetness. Like, there's this sweetness that comes when you're coming into a relationship with something painful and not tensing up and pushing it away. When we have the ability to stay with love, there's something so wonderful about that. I remember we've had sort of people talking about doing this practice and feeling like, God, I actually, I'm sort of bringing something like challenging to mind, or I'm bringing someone to mind that is suffering, and I'm actually feeling really good. Is that okay? And it's like, yeah, it feels good because there's connection. It's like, rather than like, just an inability to connect with anything that doesn't feel nice for us, we have this possibility to stay with, and that is just amazing, I think. I just think it's so amazing. And for me, personally, basically, to not to be in the world in a way that is not, basically at some level, always afraid that something's going to happen that I'm not going to be able to deal with. For that to change, and to feel like, either I feel like I now have the capacity to deal with it, or I know that I'm moving in the direction where that is going to be possible. That is like a different world for me. In terms of agency, in terms of this feeling of like, can I feel like I'm someone who can do something, that is huge as well. It's like, as we start to have an experience of like, I've got the capacity to meet whatever comes, however like dystopic and whatever the future might be, I've got the emotional ability to meet it. That's huge, isn't it? So I'm not, this system, it works as a system when you have to kind of emphasise them all evenly, but I sort of secretly really want to emphasise compassion the most, because I just think it's, you do obviously need everything, and the grounding in metta is absolutely necessary, but really, and it might just be my sort of personal tendencies or whatever, but for me that practice is just something so precious. And then, we also have to kind of attend to this sort of other dimension, the more kind of upwards dimension. So, I sometimes experience it like the metta kind of opens like this, and the compassion sort of opens like this, and the mudita, the sympathetic joy, sort of opens this way. I don't know if other people experience it like that. That's how it feels for me. So there's this sort of the dimension of like, being able to kind of connect in with, resonate with joy and kind of beauty and positivity in the world. We can be just as aversive to our joy as we are to our suffering, actually. Some of us, like, just really, we kind of feel guilty about it or ashamed of it, or it just feels really intense, and we also don't have the ability to hold it, or we feel like, it's going to kind of just throw us off somehow, but actually, in the same way as we kind of do that practice, we build our kind of container for being, it gets kind of stronger and bigger, so that the experience of like, whoa, this feeling's too big for me, kind of starts to be addressed. It's kind of, there's more, the container is kind of stronger somehow. But we're also just making sure that like, we're nourished by what we do find beautiful and wonderful. And like why we're doing why we're trying to practice, why we even want agency, why we're trying to be good people in the world. It's like we need the sense of like, oh yeah, that's why. because of this. Yeah, because I see two people. You see two people connecting with each other, and it's like, oh, I don't want humans to be extinct. So beautiful, or whatever. Yeah. And on the basis of those three sort of practices, those three dimensions, then we have this kind of maturing of the heart into the practice of equanimity, which in a way I sort of feel like, well, we've got plenty to get on with the first three. That, equanimity will get taken care of in its own time. That's how I sort of relate to it. I kind of feel like, sometimes equanimity is kind of synonymous with the end of the path in Buddhism, with enlightenment or whatever. So it's a big thing that we're talking about there. And in a way, what we know is through these practices, through the cultivation of metta and compassion and sympathetic joy, we're kind of laying the ground. We're kind of building up the ingredients that will sort of flourish into equanimity. And yeah, that means having a heart that is so big and so wide and so deep and so sort of in like the ocean or something, just so solid and stable but kind of fluid and kind of cool and open, that like whatever happens, there can be a response from depth, from emotional depth, which is a beautiful ideal to me. And I'm happy to get on with practicing compassion in the meantime. Yeah. So, if we attend to these dimensions, and doing it on your I'm sort of, when I'm talking about a system of meditation practices, but this is not only about meditation, right? This stuff, everything we do on our cushions goes on in our lives as well. I do think meditation is really helpful for kind of working. I don't think we can achieve these things to the extent that we need to without the sort of intensity of working in meditation with them. But that's not all of it. Then we are basically, we're building up an experience of emotional resilience, courage, the ability to be able to meet and respond helpfully. And if that is the kind of the confidence that we can have in our emotional lives, then our experience of feeling like we have agency will be hugely affected, in the same way as when our minds become clearer. And importantly, what both these things do, so both kind of attending to the mind dimension and attending to the heart dimension, those kinds of practices, what they also do is build a kind of container for integration. And in terms of the experience of agency, I think there are two kind of important things in there. One is we have mixed motivations, like we have sort of like mixed experience. There's a lot in us, isn't there? There's a lot that goes on. We feel like we have these different pulls in different directions, and some part of us wants to engage and some part of us really doesn't, and some part of us wants to be a hero, another part of us wants to be like a kid that's safe at home, and like there's so much kind of pulling us in different directions, and it's hard to have an experience of agency if we sort of feel like I don't really know what I want and who I am. It's also hard to have a sense of like enough confidence and sort of self-efficacy to feel like, yeah, I have agency. There's some confidence required in that, and particularly the heart practices in that way. They do help to support us to come more fully into relationship with the whole range of who we are, with kindness and with love. That means that we become more integrated, and that enables us to feel more kind of okay with who we are, basically. More like, yeah, I'm alright, and I've got some ideas about what I could do, and that's alright, and I'm sort of allowed to do that. I have, I've taught self-metta to a lot of people, like a lot of beginners, and God, people walking out of the room, can't do it, I'm going to be sick, crying. It's like the level of self-hatred that people carry around is just like it's a lot, and it's like, God, how am I supposed to have an experience of agency if basically I just hate myself? It's like, I've already got way too much to handle here, sort of thing. Like, how, So it's like we also have, what's great about these practices as well is that they're also attending to what we need to do for ourselves to become more kind of happy, healthy, integrated people. Who are clearer about what their motivations are, or we sort of know, okay, so I want to do this, but there's part of me that doesn't really want to, but I'm bringing it along, and I'm not kind of pushing out and ignoring it. And, we get sort of more literate with ourselves in that sort of way. And importantly, the kind of the mind stuff also gives us the opportunity to notice the views the views we carry. I think a lot of our views can be quite unconscious. And views are an important part of agency too. It's like my sense of what brings about change, for example. Like how do I think change happens? I don't know how many people have really thought about that. But whatever it is we subconsciously or unconsciously think about that is going to be having a big impact on whether we think we can do something or not. Or my view of who I am or what I'm capable of, or it's like as the mind gets clearer and we start to be able to stay with our experience more, we notice more that kind of thing in our experience. Oh, I've got a view about that. Is that a helpful view? Like, what if I had another view? If I try that? Like, we start to be able to get a lot more creative in a way and kind of play with our experience or have an impact, have agency in our experience through our views. Okay, so we've done confusion and uncertainty. We've done overwhelm and fear, and then what about impotence? What are we gonna do? What are we gonna put in place in our lives that's gonna enable us to feel less like there's nothing I can do? Because that's right. There's nothing I can do. There's only things we can do, and I think that's basically my limited answer to that question. Is like we've got to do things together. We've got to be able to be in relationship with each other and working together, and that's really actually hard. We all find people hard, don't we? You not find people hard, and trying to kind of get a vision, having the opportunities to come together with other people and collaborate, having the skills to do that, having the willingness to engage with the challenges of that. It's kind of like, we kind of want that. We kind of want community. We kind of want to feel like we're part of something. We kind of want to kind of contribute and be together with people. And we also kind of want to just be able to like go and do our job and then go home and do what we want and not have to like engage with annoying people sort of thing. It's like, so that, and I think in the same way, it's like, with all of these practices I'm mentioning, it's like they all require a little bit of effort in a way. It's like, oh God, sitting and trying to concentrate with a really distracted mind, it's a bit unpleasant. Or like having to turn towards my painful experience, like, do I really want to do that? Or like, oh, having to like work with other people, do I really want to have to do that? But it's like, I think if we can't have an experience of feeling like we have agency if it's just us on our own. There's no way. It's like, it's just way too much to do, and we're way too limited and way too partial. It's like we need the complementing of other people and their qualities in order to be able to feel like, together somehow something can emerge between us, through us, that is not something, again, it's more complex than we can think. We need, and there are skills required in that a lot of us don't have anymore. Because we don't really, a lot of us live in, well, I don't know how people here live, but in the world anyway, is that there's just a lot of like alienated, disconnected, sort of self-focused people sort of thing, and we're kind of in that you just lose the skill of being able to collaborate with other people, make a decision collectively, or address conflict, or the things that come up when we're working with others. It can sort of feel like, oh, those things, we're not familiar enough with them, so when they happen we just feel like, oh my God, get me out of here, and we sort of run away. And if we're gonna well, as I've said, if we're gonna have an experience of agency, we've got to feel like we can stick around, we can rely on each other, we can forgive each other, we can trust each other, we are interested in each other, in ways that mean that we have more sort of we sort of amplify our individual agency through kind of collectivizing it with other people's. And what we also do when we do that, when we work with other people, when we come together with others, is that we create an opportunity. Well, one thing about impotence is that we have this we have kind of up here we have whatever governments and corporates, whatever people who have all the power and agency, and then we have like individuals down here, and there's this like huge gap here where like how can we? There's not much way to kind of interact, and so it sort of feels like part of what we need to do. And I said this wasn't going to be talk about what we need to do, but it's just a bit of an aside. One of the things we need to do is like find ways to reoccupy that space, the kind of gap, and we have to do that collectively. We need groups to do that. Something like, using Extinction Rebellion as an example, it's like you've got loads of individuals around that feel like they care about climate change and that things are getting extinct. They all come together and do something, and then they're in Westminster talking to politicians about whatever you think about the strategy of that. It's like you see it's clear, isn't it? It illustrates the point that there's, by coming together we sort of build connection between those two levels anyway. So yeah. And the other thing I think is that when we work together with others, we create a space where where there's more opportunity to imagine something different. It's the thing about views again. It's like our views, our sense of what we can do or of what needs to be done and all of that is so conditioned by the world that we're in, conditioned by capitalism, conditioned by individualism, conditioned by greed, hatred, delusion, all the things that are like surrounding us a lot in the world. And it's hard to I think it's hard to go against that basically when it's conditioning us so much. And so what we do when we come together, what we can do is like create spaces that are not so strongly conditioning in those unhelpful ways. And that opens up a lot of sort of potential, I think. It opens up potential for sort of imagining something else, imagining a different world, imagining being a different person, imagining, or like enacting as well. Kind of enacting positive qualities, embodying values together, stuff that just otherwise is an idea somehow. It's like we start to kind of embody it and kind of live something different, and our sense of agency in that is really affected as well. It's like, well, we're doing it. I feel like we can do it. We're doing it, sort of thing. There's like creating opportunities and spaces for us to feel like we're not hoping something's going to happen, but we're making it happen, kind of thing. We also need other people to do that. So, that's all I'm going to say. I'll just tie up by saying that, I don't know about other people, but I have often felt, and still in some ways feel, some sense of like, if only the world wasn't all fucked up like this, I would be able to do what I want, or something like that. It's like it's like against my will, I have to spend my life trying to respond to this terrible crisis. I didn't choose any of this. I don't want any of this. This is not my deal. But somehow, because I'm like want to care about people or something, because I'm like open or whatever, I'm conditioned in whatever way I am. I sort of feel like, and now I have to do something, and I'm slightly like, if only it was all sorted out, and then I could do what I wanted. And that's just such a rubbish view, basically. because I think, I'm talking about, we need to develop these qualities so that we can experience ourselves as having agency, so that we can do something, and it's like actually all the qualities that I'm describing wanting are the things I really want for my life. It's like I want the experience of clarity and brightness in my mind. It's so wonderful to be able to like engage with things with a mind that works. I really want to be open. I want to be able to meet my whole experience. I want to be able to meet whatever is in front of me and be connected to it. I want to be able to live with other people and like love them and enjoy each other. It's like all these things are actually things I really want. And so in a way, the particular circumstances of how the cultivation of those things comes about is not even so important somehow. It's like how wonderful. We have conditions that give us the opportunity to cultivate these qualities that are really, I think, what all human beings want. I mean, that's a wonderful sort of thought for me.